When you're now joined for this very conversation by Marina's Vich's constitutional law expert, as well as Botsang Mulewa, political analyst, and Oliver Dixon, a socio-political analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to ANN7.
Thanks for having us.
Now, take us through the story. I mean, many people didn't see this one coming. We'll start with you, Dixon. What do you make of the ANC and the EFF now being some sort of awkward bedfellows? They've voted for this budget together.
You know, when Julius Malema sat down in Alexandra a few years ago, when launching the EFF manifesto, and you know, after the elections, when they told the nation in what direction it would be voting for in certain hunks, provinces, municipalities, and so on, Julius Malema made it very clear that the EFF will vote for two things. One, they will vote to unseat the ANC because they believe the ANC is a danger to the people. And secondly, they will vote on things that benefit the poor, right? Insofar as you believe that the ANC is dangerous to the people, you know, vote in the opposite direction, that's okay. But if the opposite direction poses an equal or greater threat to the poor, then you ought to remove the stubbornness of the first thing that you're voting on, because you know, alliance politics and coalition politics is often about compromise, give and take. And in this instance, he demonstrated to us that his defiance of the ANC or his opposition to the ANC is a stronger conviction than his conviction for emancipating the poor people. Oftentimes those things are mutually inclusive, but often they're not. And in instances where they're not, he has to vote in the direction of the poor. So I think him calling his you know, certain EFF members in Bukhale City to task is hypocritic. You know, it's not fair on the things that he promised his million-plus voters. But beyond that, and importantly here, is he demonstrates that he doesn't believe, as he explained in Parliament, in voting with your conscience. Because the people of Bukhale City were clear that they're voting with their conscience. They're voting for a budget, first of all, that is pro-poor. That's exactly what happened when they voted for the DA, when Herman Mashaba presented a pro-poor budget in the city of Johannesburg. And
an interesting point that you make there, especially when you tie it in with what's about to happen in Parliament, where ANC members were told to vote with their conscience, and now the ANC itself is saying, no, you toe the party line, and here they are seemingly saying that you guys are in contravention of what we stand for, and that is we are anti-ANC or anti-corruption, as they put it. Perhaps we can have your take on that.
Yes, and good evening to your viewers. Actually, hypocrisy is the correct word that have been used in this instance, and double standards as well. You know, the DA and EFF alliance, it's actually, they don't want to call it an alliance. They don't want to even call it a coalition when it suits them, and when it doesn't suit them, they call it a coalition. But in this instance as well, you know, actually what the central command of the EFF is doing to its own members and councillors, they're taking away their democratic right. They've been telling courts in support of the UDM, and that when the ANC members vote in Parliament, in the National Parliament, on a motion of no confidence, they should vote with their conscience. They should respect democracy. They are being threatened. You know, they went to court to say these people are not voting freely. They are being threatened. They are guarding their wallets and stomachs because they depend on the ANC to can live and eat. But they turn around and they do exactly the same to their own councillors who they want to discipline. I'm actually happy that there was no, it's very clear that there was no consultation between the councillors in Bukhale City and headquarters on this vote. It looks like there was no instruction. It was assumed by the central command team of the EFF that they will not vote with ANC under any circumstances. But they're not voting with the ANC. They're focusing on the budget of the municipality that is supposed to make sure that services are being rendered by the municipality, the responsibilities are being conducted, people have water, electricity, sewage and rubbish is being moved, that's what budget, and people are paid salaries within the municipality. Now the leadership says they're going to face disciplinary hearing, but another important element with this towards the national parliament is, remember the court's decision to say to the Speaker, you have the power to make a decision on whether people should vote secretly or not. This is aiding the Speaker, actually. This is actually aiding the decision of the court and the Speaker to be able to say, but the very same people who were supporting the application in court and celebrating are intimidating their own members. So in the Speaker of the National Assembly making a decision, she will have to take such practices into consideration.
So what would happen now if perhaps the EFF's Central Command backtracks and says, you know what, there's clearly so much backlash, it seems like we're talking in one way and acting differently. If they decide to backtrack, would you then say that it's okay for ANC members to vote with their conscience? Or you believe that as a party, they have every right at this point to discipline those members, and what must happen in Parliament will also be the ANC affirming its position to its MPs to say, you also toe the party line?
It may well go that way. There's double standards, there's just dual positions here. One, an official statement has been issued by the EFF. I do not think they will backtrack. They may come with a softer form of discipline, you know, like a slap on the wrist and let this thing go because it's only the budget. That's one. But two, they may be playing dirty politics, and this is what I wanted to put my analysis on. They may be doing this point in order to influence the bigger picture of the national government, to say the Speaker will be put in corner, as I was saying now, to say the Speaker will be able to say, I can see political parties. Remember, the Speaker is supposed to think independently as a Speaker of Parliament representing the nation, not the ANC. The Speaker can say it has happened with the DA putting their members through lie detector processes. It has now happening with the EFF going to discipline their own councillors. Therefore, in making a decision, she may be influenced to say, let us go on a secret ballot in order to avoid this. Remember, if she's thinking independently, they may be playing a game to say they're putting him in a corner. They're sacrificing Mohali City because it's a small fish, you know, in the pot, and they're going for a bigger fish in the national parliament.
Now, Oliver, if we had to talk about just the EFF and DA alliance, if we'd call it some strange coupling, what do you make of just that alliance fundamentally? Because their policies, one goes on this side and the other goes on the other. Can it ever work out?
It's very clear and it's undeniable that our state and our economy is under siege from many directions. You know, our administration nationally has made a lot of bad decisions in implementing certain policies and stuff. So they need to be held accountable and held to task by some means. So I think it's okay for political parties, especially opposition political parties, to form strategic coalitions where, you know, they can change certain things that they believe should be in the other direction. That's the nature of opposition politics. They're allowed to do that. But I think in the instance where you don't want to commit to the very things that you promised us in your coalitions, that becomes problematic. And that's what happened in the EFF. And I don't think this DA-EFF alliance is just a DA-EFF alliance, right? And I don't think the coalition is necessarily bad, even though they're on totally different sides of the ideological spectrum, right? They care about practical things like passing a budget. They care about practical things like implementing certain policies, changing certain policies, you know, and just getting services delivered in instances where it isn't. And that's valuable. But, you know, and there are other political parties who are part of certain coalitions in many instances. If you look at, you know, the IFP coalitions with certain parties and constituencies in KZN. If you look at, for instance, COPE's coalitions, COPE and UDM's coalitions in many instances where they did hold municipalities. I think those things are important. And it's important for our democratic process to allow parties to form coalitions, strategic coalitions, temporary coalitions, where they can benefit some sort of...
what about ideology? Because they differ fundamentally on ideology, because this is a left movement. If nothing else, you would think that their politics would be more aligned or closer to the ANC, which is more in the center as government. But then some could easily say that the Democratic Alliance is more to the right. So how do you find left and right?
Despite the policy, he's mentioned earlier on the fundamental foundations. Why was the EFF founded and why does the DA exist? That only, it's not even having a common objective. You get into alliances or marriages, whether they are temporary or permanent, and we are not questioning that organization cannot form an alliance. That's not what we are saying. But we are saying there's a common objective that people will get into an alliance. And there's only one common objective between the DA and the EFF at the moment, and it's removing the ANC out of power. And that is the only...
I don't think that's a fair characterization. I think they've demonstrated to us in the city of Joburg that they can reach a common objective of pro-poor. policies and pro-poor sort of actions. If you look at, for instance, the change that happened in terms of resource distribution, you know, free water has been taken out of Sandton and given to people in other parts of the city of Joburg, like Alexandra. I think that's fantastic. You can't say that they haven't been able to reach a common
this
objective
thing of free water and all that, you know, we should not look only at the implementation date. We should look at when were these things planned, and the ANC may have delayed to implement it. But some of the things that have been rolled out by local government now, decisions were made before. And I don't say there is negative in this coalition, there is only negative.
No, but this specific example came only as a reason because of this coalition. And I think we should be fair in our critique of it. Certain things are wrong, certain things work.
All things fair in politics. Let's quickly just check in with our weather. Thank you, gentlemen.